In the 1800s, Japan was experiencing rapid urbanization and industrialization. This led to social instability and agriculture decline. As a result, many were forced to leave their land to seek opportunities elsewhere, such as Hawaii and America. The Japanese came with advanced agricultural skills that brought great envy. Soon after they arrived in America, they became the target of racism and discrimination.
At the same time, Japan was looking to expand its land. However, this would put them on a collision course with America as they both wanted to establish colonies in Asia. It can be argued that the start of Japan and America's conflict stemmed from them both wanting to control Asia's markets and natural resources.
Back in America, the Japanese had mostly based themselves in California. Their farming skills were able to transform the driest field into a lush farm. With their skills came jealousy, as they were producing a third of the state's crops while only having 2% of the state's farmland. Even though they were successful in farming, they were excluded from political life. They could not have significant power.
In the 1930s, Japan's invasion of China unfolded with limited intervention from the United States. As American companies supplied Japan with resources like steel and petroleum, this support persisted even as the conflict escalated into a full-scale war, resulting in significant Chinese civilian casualties. It wasn't until the early 1940s when tensions heightened and President Roosevelt cut off key shipments that the United States began to address Japan's aggression in China amid its focus on European conflicts.
Back in America, tensions were high too, as the FBI was searching the homes of Japanese Americans, although the searches did not turn up with anything, as none of the houses searched had anything to do with the Japanese emperor or the country.
Due to the cut on shipments, Japan proceeded to respond by cementing their alliance with Germany and Italy. Worried America froze all Japanese assets in the U.S. This led to Japan secretly beginning to plan its southern invasion, which would target Great Britain's naval facility in Singapore and American installations in the Philippines. Japanese and American diplomats tried to come to an agreement or treaty, but neither side would budge. Japan was determined to carry out their plan.
On November 29, 1942, Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor with 414 planes aboard 6 aircraft carriers. Maintaining strict radio silence, the Japanese caught the U.S. Pacific Fleet off guard, resulting in a devastating 2-hour assault on Pearl Harbor and simultaneous attacks on the U.S. and British bases worldwide. In response, President Roosevelt mobilized the nation for war, shifting focus towards preparedness and engagement in the conflict.
After Pearl Harbor, racism towards Japanese Americans skyrocketed. Businesses were trashed, homes were vandalized, and property was stolen. The FBI was ransacking and searching homes all across the West Coast. These images are clearly remembered by all those who saw this transpire. This soon led to a great amount of pressure to take a course of action that had never been taken before. On February 19, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, effectively placing all people who were deemed a threat to national security into military areas.
Some were against the order. The head of the FBI, John Hoover, was very opposed to the order because he thought that his agency had successfully identified and captured those who posed any kind of threat. 6 days after Pearl Harbor, the FBI managed to capture a German spy ring, a group of 33 Nazi spies that were feeding information to the Nazis. Hoover felt that it wasn't necessary to take any further action.
But the order went through anyway. It was up to the Secretary of War, John D. Witt, to interpret what to do with the order. He could have chosen to place Germans or Italians into internment camps, but he chose only Japanese Americans, simply because of their race.
120,000 Japanese Americans were only given a few days to pack. They could only bring what they could carry. Their bank accounts were frozen, and their businesses were liquefied. Family heirlooms were destroyed immediately. Homes and belongings had to be either sold at dirt cheap or destroyed. Homes were often raided after they left for the camps.
Over 70,000 of the incarcerated were American citizens, but their rights were taken away and denied without due process of law.
Before they were placed into camps, they were placed into horse tracks or other different locations so the barracks could be built. They were dehumanized and treated horribly. An attorney, Gordon Hirabayashi, stated, "We were uprooted from our homes, our lives disrupted, and confined to this desolate place solely based on our ancestry.
The camps were worse. With 10 in total, the barracks were made in a rush. Woods were not cured, and walls often had gaps in them. With walls so thin, you could hear everything on the other side. Privacy was not an option. Conditions were harsh, as winters in camps like Heart Mountains could reach 28 degrees below zero. But people didn't have the correct clothing because they weren't told anything.
Internee Sam Mihar was only 9 years old when he and his family were taken to the camp. Before, Sam lived a comfortable life. His father ran a newspaper business and his family lived in a spacious house. Sam recalled that he was confused about why his parents suddenly started packing one day. His father had to tell him about why they were being forced out of their home and they didn't know where they were going. Once they arrived at Heart Mountain, the biggest camp in the country, problems soon surfaced. He said, like all the camps, the main problem was the lack of medical care.
Mr. Mihar's family had multiple issues. His father had glaucoma. Back in San Francisco, he had the help of a specialist, but General DeWitt did not allow him to get the help that he needed, which left him blind. His grandfather had colon cancer and ended up dying a painful death in the camp.
Another example of the camp's failure to give needed help is Kathy Yulia. Miss Yulia was born in the camp, and her mother had to walk 1.5 miles to give birth to her in a hospital that was on the other side of the camp.
For 3 long years, Japanese Americans were held against their wills, having to provide for themselves and their families in whatever way possible. In turn, Japanese Americans faced daily hardships, working in difficult conditions to survive while building schools and communities. However, the government presented a misleading image to the outside world through carefully curated photographs, concealing the true struggles and horrors experienced by the internees, including children born in the camps who knew no life beyond the confines of their prison-like environment.
In December 1945, all camps except Lake Tulp closed. Everyone had to leave. All families were given $25 and a bus ticket to anywhere in the country. After losing everything they had and knowing the animosity of their old neighbors on the West Coast, many families decided to try and start a new life in a different city, such as Chicago. However, a few families returned to their old homes, but what they saw devastated them. Their houses were occupied by strangers, and their belongings were gone. On top of that, reintegration posed significant challenges, as they had to confront prejudice and discrimination daily. Rebuilding their lives proved a difficult task, as many still had feelings of unjust resentment towards Japanese Americans. They couldn't return to the lives before. This soon became a housing issue, as there were 120,000 citizens suddenly without homes or stable jobs.
However, in the face of these difficulties, Japanese Americans demonstrated remarkable strength and determination. Some dedicated themselves to rebuilding their communities and ensuring the preservation of their culture. They played a pivotal role in advocating for fairness and equal rights. Even after enduring such tough times, they persevered, working tirelessly to create a better future for themselves and their families.
In 1988, 33 years after the traumatizing events of Executive Order 9066, the U.S. government finally decided to acknowledge the horrors and the injustice that the internment camps caused. They compensated each internee with $20,000, but no amount of money could ever fix the destruction that the internment caused. History has ways of repeating itself, but this is a piece of history that should never happen again. There have been many turning points throughout history, but none are as shocking, dehumanizing, and destructive as Executive Order 9066.